Batman has had some iconic love interests. Now, while these days many may be more familiar with him and Catwoman, the Dark Knight has had other contenders for his heart. And the first one to ever appear on screen is not one who many may remember or think about. Not Selina, not Vicki Vale, not even Julie Madison, but instead Linda Paige. Linda Paige is not an overly well-remembered love interest. Even Julie Madison has gotten more play in contemporary arenas. However, Linda was a very interesting one, and she figured in some key stories and also had a provocative update in the Rebirth era. And you know what that means. It's time for a kind of retrospective as to where the character stands up to this point in time recording. And it means we get to go back to the Golden Age, which I love doing. I'm Sash, this is Casually Comics, and we're going to examine the evolution of Linda Paige and her history. Now, Linda is Bruce's second steady love interest after Julie Madison. Julie broke up with Bruce for being a wastrel, never forget that. A key part of Bruce's persona during the Golden Age was that he was part of cafe upper society. They keep calling that a cafe set millionaire. He played it up that he was a playboy and a dilettante, an idler as he'll say. Bruce's persona was that he was very much flitting through life. He didn't want to be taken seriously because he wanted distance between him and Batman. Linda's first appearance is in Batman number 5 from the year 1941 in the story Crime Does Not Pay. It's written by Bill Finger with art by Bob Kane, inks Jerry Robinson, and George Russos. Bruce runs into Linda on the street and we right away get some background of the history between the two, namely that they move in the same circles and that they know each other. Linda will prove to be more socially conscious than her peers, which Bruce also is on the inside, but he doesn't show that on the outside. Accordingly, the Batman costume is discarded, and the next day it is Bruce Wayne, playboy of society, who saunters down the streets when... Well, you big ape, why don't you look... Bruce Wayne?
Linda Paige. Well, I haven't seen you in a dog's age. The whole crowd has been asking about you.
Tell the crowd I woke up one day to realize there are more important things than cafe society. So I've moved out and become a nurse.
A nurse? You gave up a place in society to work for a living? It's stupid.
Wow, with that attitude, no wonder she decided to date him. He's not putting his best foot forward. Actually, we start off with the same dynamic that Julie and Bruce had a little bit during their dating. We don't start off with a vampire story. That's how we got Julie. We start off the same in the sense that Linda thinks that Bruce has potential and she wants him to reach it. She can fix him. You're the one who's stupid, wasting your life as the great society playboy. You've got talent. If you wanted to,
don't try to reform me. I'm having too good a time to kill myself with work.
It's no use talking to you. Come on, at least you can walk me home.
Sure, I want to see this little flat of yours, Woiking Goyle.
That accent that he puts on there. Oh. This walk takes him down to the more modest neighborhood where Linda is staying, which is actually where Bruce was headed because he's been investigating a mafia crime, a crime that he saw that children are being used in. And so he's trying to go figure out the circumstances by which that is happening. The interesting thing as it pertains to Linda here is that she's not just LARPing in this issue. She really is committed to just living by her own means. And so she ends up being integral to the plot in that Batman, who has been investigating some mobsters, it turns out that the children that he's looking for are of a woman in this neighborhood. Linda's job as a nurse leads to her getting kidnapped, separate from this because one of those boys ends up getting hurt. So they need a nurse, and she's there in the neighborhood. That night, as Linda Paige sits in her apartment, the door is suddenly thrust open. Okay, babe, grab your instrument bag. You're going for a little ride. What's the idea? We got a patient for you. Come on. Hey, what you doing? You can't expect me to go out without putting some fresh lipstick on, do you? If this was the Silver Age, this would most likely just be a woman are so vain, am I right kind of moment, but it's the Golden Age, so there's a true purpose to it. This is actually Linda being incredibly resourceful and using their assumptions about women against them. She's also not afraid to mouth off to the mob at gunpoint. Linda's feisty. Are you gonna fix Tommy up and keep your mouth closed? You know I won't talk. If I did, it would kill your mother to know Tommy was a bank robber. You know I won't do anything to hurt Tommy. He kept hanging around. You know how it is. You gotta believe me. I believe you. Tommy just wanted to be what you are because he idolizes you. But you let him down, Mike. You let him down. Now, what Linda was really doing with the lipstick is that she left a note. And this allows Batman, who is investigating what he learned earlier, when he gets to her apartment and sees the break-in and everything, he's able to then track her and find her. She also gets involved in the fight that goes down at the location, taking out a gunman who's going to shoot Batman. And afterwards, she's really impressed with Batman and how he came to the rescue. The story ends up being pretty tragic. The youngest brother has to watch his oldest brother die. It leans into what the title is, which is that crime does not pay. Now, because of all this, Linda develops a crush on Batman and then starts comparing him to Bruce because she likes how he's actually trying to make something of himself and make a difference. And in a restaurant, look, you've been talking about the Batman all evening. What's he got that I haven't got? I've got money, good looks. A girl isn't always interested in that. He represents excitement, color, daring. I can't exactly explain it. I do wish they had gone into some of the undercurrents as to what she sees in Batman because they're right there to be pulled upon based on the backstory that they've given her. This is where they fall into tropes of the time, which is just that, oh, he's a dashing hero, so of course. However, there were some really compelling reasons based on how she feels about her wealth and her position and how Batman is entering into this world that she now occupies that give her some strong reasons to have a crush on him. Bruce is nice, and I do like him a lot, but if he only were a little more like the Batman. But I guess that's asking too much.
Oh, it looks very much like the Batman will be seeing more of Linda Page in the future. I'll see to that.
Way to make it weird, Bruce. Now, in the same year of 1941, we'll see Linda popping up across different titles as she's being established. We'll see her in things like World's Finest #2, in the story The Man Who Couldn't Remember. And this issue is significant because Bruce keeps up his whole "you'll see me again." This time, it's as Batman. And she ends up being key to the case as she discerns the man he's brought has amnesia.
No, the most plot convenient of illnesses. He'll never recover.
No, that's not true. He'll recover right when he needs to. But more significantly than any of that is that she refuses to be left behind. She wants in on the action. She's no shrinking violet. She goes along with Batman and Robin because they're gonna try and prompt the man's memory, and she wants to be there to keep him safe. So once more, we're seeing that she's headstrong, confident, and decisive, and she's treated like an equal to Batman, although that in and of itself is not uncommon for the Golden Age. She does get captured and called a dame, but she's saved and also ends up in the Batmobile on the ride back discussing things with Batman and Robin, which makes her feel very integrated. In Detective Comics 54, Hook Morgan and his Harbor Pirates, Bruce starts dating her, again making good on the whole "she's gonna be seeing a lot of me everywhere." It's never overtly stated, not like how she has her thought balloon thinking about how she really likes Bruce, but it can be inferred that he does really like her. And he's just very corny and kind of cute with her. The next day, the home of Bruce Wayne and his young ward, Dick Grayson. "This Harbor Pirate stuff is getting to be serious business. Hey, cut it out, you weren't even listening."
"Right, my tussle-headed friend. Today I listen only to the lovely voice of beautiful Linda Page. See you in the funny pages, kid. Greetings, fair lady."
"Flowers. Thank you, kind sir. Just a second, I'll be with you. You don't know it yet, but we're going shopping." This story sees more of her getting annoyed with Bruce for not making more of himself and not being Batman, for being idle in her eyes. They learned this issue that the cloth that she was going to pick up was stolen by the Harbor Pirates. I guess the Batman could help them get... What's the matter, Bruce? You look as if you were seeing a ghost.
Oh, nothing at all. I am seeing a ghost, the ghost of that exclusive cloth.
Later.
"Well, Linda, gotta go now."
"Yes, and I can guess where. To some nightclub. I should think you might find something useful to do with your nights instead of killing precious time in a nightclub."
Let Bruce dance the night away. I know it's not that kind of club. It's just that's the image that it conjures up contemporarily.
That's all of her for this issue, but the dynamic between her and Bruce is mostly set. But as it stands, Bruce likes Linda, Linda likes Bruce, however, she likes Batman more. But it's put out there that she would like Bruce more if he was contributing to society, and hence one can infer that's what she feels Batman is doing. Although again, you have to kind of make that link, but it's not a hard one to make. All of the threads are there just to connect. Because in the Golden Age, we very much have Batman there taking down, for the most part, although he does have recurring villains, organized crime. And these crimes, you'll see, they're often impacting the underprivileged. It's also important that Bruce as Batman also likes Linda because she's resourceful and he feels that he can rely on her. And also that he seems to like playing messed up secret identity games, even if they don't benefit him like they don't in Batman #6. The Secret of the Iron Jungle, where Linda's father is having difficulty because his Texas oil fields are being threatened. So Linda has some decent cushion then. We see that she's still working, and at this point that she seems to be regularly dating Bruce.
"Why, Linda, quitting work?"
"Bruce, please be serious. I heard Dad's having troubles down at his Texas oil fields."
"If he needs money."
"No, his life is in danger ever since that gusher was expected." Bruce does drop everything to go deal with this as Batman, but he gets no credit for it and even gets chastised because to go down there as Bruce, he has to pretend he's just going on some kind of sightseeing frivolous trip. It comes off like he's going on a Playboy sojourn rather than trying to help her dad, and so it doesn't lift his estimation as Bruce in her eyes. She is very disdainful towards him at the end.
"Why, hello, Linda. What brings you here? I heard a lot of noise and wondered what was happening."
"I'm sorry it spoiled your beauty sleep."
"Can I give you a ride back?"
"Thanks a lot, but there couldn't be any excitement driving with you. Weren't you man enough to help Dad? I'd like you a bit better if you took a leaf out of Batman's book." It's characters like this where, well, personally for me, I would love to see a character reveal. You know that Linda would have slapped Bruce. Detective Comics 55 gives us the Brain Burglar, and it has the two going on another date to her uncle's aviation plant, which is supplying bombers for the war. Linda is once more hoping this is going to inspire Bruce to do something. Minutes later, Bruce and Linda walk toward the great aviation plant. "Bruce, It's really inspiring. I see. You wanted to get me interested in aviation, so I'll find myself some sort of occupation. Sorry. Come on, Bruce, make some warplanes. It's 1941. Actually, their flirting here is kind of cute. I don't know why I bother to try to make something of you. Maybe it's because you like me, huh? Golden Age Bruce has intense charisma. He would have to appear to be floating through life like this to the extent that he is and still have so many people wanting to hang around him. Although the money would also help with that. But that's different for Linda because she comes from money. This is the kind of energy you see being pulled from in later eras like the 70s. You're even seeing some of this energy in the latest Fraction era run. Latest time recording, 2025, 2026. Bruce and Dr. Annika Zeller have this kind of energy in their date issue a little bit. Sorry, they're not date issue. Now, Bruce gets caught up in things when the workers suddenly go berserk, and Linda is terribly worried about him. But also, you know who would have been able to deal with this no problem? Batman. Later, it's Bruce Wayne who stumbles out from behind the packing cases after being Batman. Bruce, are you all right?
Oh, my jaw. What hit me? What happened? What happened? Only some men went crazy, and the Batman came out of nowhere and stopped them, that's all.
The Batman? That guy again. That guy probably saved your life and my uncle's plant from being ruined, which is more than you did. It's like he's saving up all these times to eventually throw in her face. Batman number 7, the Trouble Trap, sees Linda's association with Batman getting her kidnapped. She's developed a reputation for helping the Dark Knight, and this ends up being something that Batman uses to his advantage. He takes out the kidnapper that is taking her hostage and then instead impersonates him. And then they continue on. With her consent, she knows they're doing this. They let her in on it. The same cannot be said for every other story out there. Silver Age Superman would never. And so once again, Linda gets to be involved in taking down the criminals. In this issue, they're running a blackmail scheme. Now, sometimes Linda is just incorporated into the plot. And in this way, she becomes a secure and stable support. And she may know information or a person. And that's what we have in Detective Comics 57, 24 Hours to Live, where her contribution is being friends with the girl whose uncle has 24 hours to live. And so decides that he's going to go on a crazed crime spree to let people know how he really feels about them. He's got 24 hours to burn it all down. We also have in Batman number 9, she's one of the characters who delivers the Christmas message of 1942, alongside Batman, Robin, and Commissioner Gordon, which really does make it feel like she's a key support in the book. And she will continue to be expanded upon and have her character built out. Linda is also observant, and that comes into play in Detective Comics 63, A Gentleman of Gotham, which features a villain they were setting up to recur, but he never did. And I'm salty because he's great. I made a short on him. His name is Mr. Baffle, and then he gets another identity, Charles Courtley, which is an improvement on that name. I'm salty because him and Batman have a great rapport. They banter. They both each think the other is genuinely funny. They really enjoy their chases. They have that kind of relationship. Mr. Baffle is a ridiculously charming, rakish thief who does things like convince the men trying to rob him to become his henches. He's just that likable. Now he decides to start robbing the elites. First just breaking into their houses and robbing them, and he starts with Bruce Wayne, which brings him into conflict with Batman. He picked the wrong person first. Because this doesn't work out, he decides that he needs to kind of case joints beforehand and get the lay of the land, and so he sets up an identity of Charles Courtley and becomes a society columnist. This is how Linda meets him when on a date with Bruce to a party where Courtley is there to case it out because he wants to steal some jewels later. And when he comes back to rob the place, he ends up interacting with Linda and lightly taking her hostage because he's one of those gentlemanly villains. He'd never truly harm a lady, or anyone else, so it seems. But he can't resist turning the charm onto Linda.
Ah, my dear, I am indeed grateful for your very timely entrance. You appeared as if on cue.
How queer, his fingertips are all raw, as if rubbed by an abrasive. So the thing here is that he sanded down his fingertips so they could be extra sensitive so he can feel out those safe dials. He's a professional. Now you see here that just like her first appearance, even when in danger, Linda has presence of mind, which is how she will identify him later on when he pretends he's actually Batman. Later, the guests sleep, but crime is on the move.
How childishly simple it. Oh, why Linda? You still up?
I just heard you. The Batman unmasked. So it was really you all the time. Batman, you're just what I always imagined you'd look like. Tall, handsome, debonair, but your mustache.
Unnecessary disguise, beautiful lady.
Linda's eyes stare as if fascinated at Mr. Baffle's upturned fingers.
Your fingers, all red, raw, sandpapered.
You're not the Batman. You're the thief from the Davies home.
Dangerous knowledge, my dear. I'm afraid I'll have to gag that beautiful mouth of yours.
This issue ends with a very gentlemanly fencing match, where at the end of everything, Mr. Baffle leaps from a building with Batman calling behind him how they could have been friends and he would have liked to be friends, but they're on opposite sides. Mr. Baffle saying that they'll meet again and they never do. How could you deny me this golden age? Anyway, by 1942, Linda is semi-regularly appearing in both Batman and Detective Comics. We have a prolonged sequence between her and Bruce in Detective Comics 69, The Harlequin's Hoax, which is a Joker story. She doesn't feature in the crime section itself. However, beforehand, there's a lengthy segment of her and Bruce on a date at the fair. And they're having a really good time. Again, they have a very easy chemistry and they're cute. Now, they get stuck on a ride, which at first is fine, minus the gossip columnist staring at them. They even send up some mics for them to talk to people. One insane hour later, sandwiches and a mic are hauled up to the pair. If any of my family are listening in, I don't want them to worry if I'm late for supper.
And if my ward Dick is listening to my voice, don't worry if I'm late for supper.
If you're like, le gasp, what about Alfred? Alfred's not there yet. Dick's just wandering around at home alone. Also, that one sandwich is huge. Also, it's only been 1 hour. Sending up preserves like that? Is an hour an unreasonable amount of time for a ride to be broken down in 1942? Ooh, they're not ready for how long rides are broken now. Tell Dick to do his homework. Now, it's all fun and sandwiches until the bat signal goes off. And then Bruce has to find a way to get down. And so his plan, he just unbuckles and throws himself off the ride. He makes it look like he fell. But that fall is checked as trained steely fingers clamp vice-like on the cable.
Made it. Things I go through to keep my identity a secret.
You know, if Linda was so savvy that she was feeling the changes of people's hands, would she not feel some of the calluses that Bruce most likely has? He would not have the hands of someone who is idle. Also, he'd probably be pretty bruised and hurt. I think if you brought Linda back in a different way than they did, then potentially you could have her figure it out pretty easily. Bruce is very mangled for someone who's pretending to live this kind of frivolous lifestyle. Now, after asking about Linda, Bruce just leaves. Oh, I bet she loved that, just being abandoned at the amusement park. What could his excuse possibly have been for not waiting? I would love to have known, but we don't see her again. That's probably why we don't bring back some of these things at the end of the issue. He couldn't explain it. He couldn't make up for that. She already wishes he was Batman half the time. Now we're in 1943, and this is the year where Linda makes her leap into the Batman film serials, where she's played by Shirley Patterson. She is in 11 of the chapters. The entire series is on YouTube if you're curious about it. Now, it has some period typical moments, like the portrayal of the villain. However, and it is interesting to see a depiction of Batman from that time, to see what elements are brought forward and to see how some of them translate on screen. What you see in the interactions between Bruce and Linda in this is that this series really does capture the impression of their relationship as it stood.
You've had your usual busy day, I suppose.
Yep. Up at the crack of noon, a brisk walk to the corner, and then the club for a rugged afternoon of gin rummy.
And it's really interesting to see that Playboy dynamic on screen and see how they pull it off.
Well, I guess there's no use in my trying to do anything. The Batman always gets there ahead of me.
She does a really good job of conveying fond exasperation, and the fact that she's the character used highlights the fact that she must have seemed like the love interest for Batman. She's also presented here as having a job and being confident. It's not the same job as in the comics, but you can see that she's doing things. She's also still resourceful. Even though trouble does befall her, she gets hypnotized. But of course, it all works out in the end. 1943 also sees the end of Linda as a love interest for Batman. I'll go in the order that I think makes sense for them to have broken up, because both of the issues come from the same month. So first up, Detective Comics 73, The Scarecrow returns. Which is not a lie, that is indeed what happens. The Scarecrow accosts them at a hat shop that Bruce does not want to be at because he thinks most women's hats are terrible. Suddenly, a grim, tattered figure steps upon the stage. Styles, you women are fools. Isn't he awful?
Well, I'll say he is. He's the Scarecrow, one of the most dangerous crooks on Earth. He escaped from prison where the Batman sent him. Smooth, super smooth. She'll never know. She actually won't, and that makes me sad.
This is another one of those date interrupted issues where it goes on to be about the Scarecrow returning and not about Bruce and Linda. But then we have Batman 15, Your Face, Your Fortune. This is an important Linda story. It's an important Catwoman story. It's just a standout Golden Age Batman story. So we need to give it a bit more space to breathe so you can experience all of it. Now, this is a story from the Catwoman has an actual cat head era of Catwoman. And here she's disguised as Elva Barr and working at a beauty salon catering to upper class clientele. Bruce recognizes her at a beauty contest that she enters, and he votes for her to be the winner because everybody's just talking about how she's gorgeous, and he agrees. But even Bruce is forced to pay tribute to Elva Barr's outstanding beauty. Hold that, Miss Barr! The judges unanimously agree on the winner, Elva Barr. So that's Bruce Wayne. Isn't he handsome? Congratulations, Miss Barr. If I only could read your mind, Catwoman. This moment is really important, and the art actually conveys it very well. You can see that she's just overwhelmed by Bruce's handsomeness, and it's at this moment that Catwoman starts to be interested in Bruce Wayne. This seems to be the issue that seeds the idea of potentially having Catwoman with Batman and Bruce in some capacity. It doesn't work out, as you'll see, but you know, we're starting to think about it. Now, the results of this beauty contest make the paper, and Linda reads it, and she's jealous. Next morning, somebody else is interested in Elva, lovely Linda Paige. So that's whom Bruce Wayne considers beautiful? Well, I don't think she's so hot. Even from the silhouette in the paper, I can tell she's hot. Also, Linda's blonde this issue. Now, the plan here is actually that Catwoman is making masks based off the faces of her clients so that she can then impersonate them and get into locations she needs to so that then she can pull off crimes. Bruce does figure this out. When he goes to stop her, things take a turn. The proud crime queen's head bows in defeat. All right, you win, Batman. But I wish it had been different. Oh, what's the use? What do you mean? I'm in love, Batman. In love with a fine, decent man. He's a good man. You've probably heard of him. Bruce Wayne. In love with me. Oh, if you'd only let me go, Batman. If I knew I had a chance with him, I'd give up my life of crime. Well, I wonder. Maybe she's really sincere. What a spot for me to be in. And so Batman accidentally lets her go to let her have this chance, which means that despite already dating Linda, Bruce starts intensely courting Elva. We just see tons of dates. It's a montage. That's how much dating is happening. He has to do it for the greater good, for Gotham. He's a hero. Dick is not here for this. He likes Linda. And then one morning, newspapers announce the engagement of Society Playboy to beauty contest winner. But Bruce, you can't do this. That Elva's the Catwoman. What's got into you? What about Linda? What about us? Patience, my lad. You're too young to understand these things. You'll learn all about cheating to cure ladies of their criminal tendencies when you're older. You're not ready for the we can fix them talk. Also, yes, he got engaged to her, and Linda learns this from the paper. Meanwhile, somebody else has seen the newspapers. A hurt, bewildered girl. Linda Paige. And I thought Bruce loved me. I hate him. I don't care who he's engaged to. But Linda does care. And Linda's toxic trait is that she's gonna go and scope out Elva and see what she has that she doesn't. She is going to go and confront her boyfriend's fiance. Actually, no, she's just gonna go and passive aggressively sit there and feel really bad for herself. But Catwoman also knows that Bruce used to date Linda, and also that he has this Playboy rep, because her gang keep telling her that Bruce actually is in love with Linda. So when Linda comes into her salon, she decides to take a cast of her face and find out. And so Catwoman schedules a lunch with Bruce disguised as Linda. She wants to talk to him as Linda to find out how he really feels. And what follows is one of the messiest scenes I have ever read. I love it. And so that afternoon, the Catwoman meets Bruce Wayne in the guise of Linda Paige. I wanted to find out personally if you were really engaged to that girl. Now listen, Linda, please understand. I'm doing a favor for the Batman. He asked me to do this. You must trust me, Linda. My engagement won't be for long, just long enough to get the Catwoman going straight. So he really doesn't love me. He loves Linda, and he's just doing this because the Batman asked him. Linda, please. Never mind, Mr. Wayne. I'm leaving, fool that I was. This is the Batman's fault. He wanted to reform me. Well, I'll show him. A dejected Bruce Wayne, meanwhile, returns home and receives an incredible message. Linda called about 15 minutes ago to congratulate you, Bruce. She said to tell you she was at the beauty salon and saw your fiancé. Woo, we know that wasn't a real congratulations. Linda? Why, I was with her 15 minutes ago. It couldn't be. It's impossible. He flew too close to the sun. Now he has no ladies. I mean, this is as close as we get to Linda breaking up with him on panel. It's pretty heavily implied that that's what she's doing. Congratulations, Mr. Wayne. I got engaged to Catwoman because Batman told me to was not the save that he thought it would be, even if he had gotten the chance to actually tell her. Listen, Linda, I had to sleep with her to reform her. I'm just that good. That's worth a drink to the face. Robin also sasses Bruce out and gets his for it. Sometime later at the Wayne home. Where do you think you're going, youngster? Oh, just after the Catwoman. Or I suppose you can come along too. Although you might be too old to understand that sort of thing. Now look here, brat. What have you been up to? Speak up or you get a spanking. He does capture Catwoman, and we don't see Linda again for decades. The next time we see her is in a retelling of her and Bruce's time together for an Earth 1 story, and that's Batman 208 in 1969. And that's significant because it's going to confirm her as a love interest on both Earths. In this issue, we get a speedrun retelling of Batman 5 down to the same lines. Then we go deep into the Bronze Age in Brave and the Bold 167 from the year 1980, which is a Batman Blackhawks team-up story set on Earth 2 because it's set in the 1940s, so that means it has to be the Batman of Earth 2. Linda's in this story just for 2 panels to confirm that her and Bruce are dating, and they have their dynamic from when the two aren't getting along the best. I must say, Bruce, you're a real disappointment. But I enjoy living the happy-go-lucky life, Linda. I know, Bruce, but you shouldn't be frittering yourself away. You should do something with your life. Maybe you're right. Let me go home and sleep on it, eh? But it's not even 10.
Never too early to turn over a new leaf, I always say.
We next see her in Brave and the Bold 197 in 1983, and that's a special issue. That is the autobiography of Bruce Wayne. This is an Earth 2 story about how Batman fell in love with and married Catwoman. It's written by Alan Bernard, who we've read letters from on this channel. It has pencils by Joe Staton, inks George Freeman, and colors by Adrian Roy. And Linda is in this story in the context of a couple of things, and the first is that Bruce is attending her wedding, and the two of them seem to be on good terms.
What the? Bruce, what are you doing? Well, according to tradition, it's bad luck for the groom to see the bride. But tradition doesn't say a thing about old boyfriends.
Same old Bruce. I'm so glad you came. I was a little afraid you wouldn't want to.
Linda, it's been 10 years.
I know, but the things I said back then. I do appreciate the idea that she actually called him out, because some of his behavior, especially if some of the things from that era are in play, he was a cad. Also, that's a real close hug for an ex. The two of them start to talk, and she tells him that she could tell that something was going on with him, but not exactly what, and she wishes that she had reached out more. It's the 80s at this point, so we're more into exploring depth in characters in general. And so this story goes into exploring the Brucey persona that Bruce puts on, as well as his complicated relationship with his wealth and people in the same social bracket and status as him, which he's not overly fond of, how he feels about how the performances of being Brucey and also Batman are impacting him as a person. It gets pretty deep. And one of the reasons the story can go so far is because this is Earth 2, and on this Earth, Bruce settles down and retires. So here you're kind of getting to see some of the history behind that.
I had no right to try and change you. I just couldn't figure out why someone with your intelligence would want to spend his life playing polo. Is that still how you want to be remembered, Bruce? As just another name on the social register?
There's no way I can explain myself to you, Linda.
Maybe not, but I wish you'd tried. I don't know what secret pain you're hiding, Bruce, but whatever it is, I do hope you make your peace with it.
Damn this Playboy pose. I lost Julie Madison because of it. I lost Linda. He goes on, and the speech is very good, but in terms of Linda, that's where it cuts off, and that's what we're looking at for this video. But it also does position her as incredibly important to him and a very significant love interest, and someone who, if things had been different, he would have liked to see things work out with.
Just to touch on it though, this is some excellent Bruce Wayne characterization and a really good understanding of his relationship of himself and Batman. It's just one of those moments where it shows that if you take the time to approach things from this character angle and the way their environment impacts them, you can get such compelling, interesting stories without really having to change all that much, if anything, around them, but just take the things that are there and take the time to explore and extrapolate and think about them from all the various angles that exist, and keeping all that history in mind. I'm getting very passionate about it because we're going to see a story later that does and does not do that. Now, this is a Scarecrow plot where it makes the person visualize the thing they're most afraid of. And in the case of Bruce in this series, it's being alone, which makes a lot of sense given how he lost his family at such a young age. He doesn't want to be alone. Because he's also at this wedding and romance is on his mind, this manifests as his love interests vanishing. So to him, Linda vanishes in front of his eyes. This also ends up with him being very vulnerable and confessing his feelings to Catwoman. This is just an excellent issue. But as for Linda, that's all the pre-crisis Linda we have. At least that's all I could find. If there are any that I missed, let me know. But what we have here, we have a very good solid picture of Linda. A member of Gotham's elite who eschews their more vapid lifestyle in favor of a more meaningful one. Someone resourceful who doesn't get overwhelmed. Also someone capable, but also someone possessing a bit of a passive-aggressive streak, and someone who's able to stand up for herself in some pretty harrowing situations, but less so in personal ones, which is interesting. That's a fun dynamic for a character. She's a solid civilian character, and was a decent love interest for Bruce, and more could have been done with her because she worked well with Batman too. Again, I would have loved to see a character reveal for these two. But that brings us to post-crisis, and I was able to track down one story where she plays a key role, and it contextualizes her and Bruce's relationship through a different framework. It's one that's not full-fledged Golden Age, but more one that examines Batman through a contemporary lens and then places some Golden Age elements on top of that in a kind of trimmings kind of way. This story is from DC Crimes of Passion from 2020. The title, More Than Maybe. It's written by Steve Orlando with art by Greg Smallwood. It's a short story and a loose floating, almost disconnected one. It's just happening in its own space. It doesn't have a lot of context. It opens with Bruce writing a letter to Linda that's going to continue on in the narration boxes throughout some of it. Now, it's not exactly clear what time period this is taking place in. It's never stated. You don't get a date, say it's the 1940s explicitly or anything. Some of the way their clothing is rendered could make one think that it's meant to harken back to the Golden Age, but also sometimes Gotham is depicted as having a kind of retro thing going on. The things to make one think that it is in the past is the costuming and also the fact that Linda is here. But
But again, nothing explicit, and it's also blending canons because he mentions that he met her at an Elliot gala, an Elliot family gala, and that's Thomas Elliot Hush. Now, with all that being said, in this, Linda seems to have the same kind of relationship with her wealth, although it's even more overtly hostile than it is in the Golden Age.
I never expected you, so uncomfortable in the halls of the rich, despite, because of your wealth, you who were interested in the actions of good, not words.
Linda is very much going to be used in this story as a kind of reflection towards Bruce. She's very much going to be a narrative prop in this. However, he's also not going to bounce off her. For example, that just describes how she feels about wealth as he perceives it and as she will later articulate. But it doesn't go into how he feels. Those kind of things are left to be assumptions to be filled in by the reader, and usually from a kind of negative space. Now, Linda also is a nurse or caretaker here. Again, it's not explicitly stated, but she seems to be. She's changing bedpans. She's working in an old folks home. Bruce and Linda really hit it off, and she calls him a work in progress. So they do seem to be playing with that whole he can do more element. However, that may be me reading into that because I'm familiar with Linda and her history and the dynamic that they usually have. As it stands here, it's just there's a kind of flirtatious little moment, but we're still skirting the edges of she can fix him. Now we see that their relationship develops very quickly. They're sleeping together, and also she's complaining a lot about Batman and the fact that Bruce brought her to the penthouse. She claims she doesn't need the penthouse, which is meant to kind of further her relationship with her wealth. However, it made me ask the question of where else is Bruce supposed to take her? From all everybody knows that Bruce is just this dilettante playboy, is he supposed to just take her to a hotel or motel? Cause I think Bruce, as his Bruce persona, only has penthouses to take women to.
It's not you, it's the news, this Batman. What people like us have is a privilege. The costume, the weapons. Batman clearly has wealth, but he abuses it. He should be compassionate to people that has advantages, who've had to compromise where we don't need to. He attacks when he should be asking why people did what they did in the first place. You get that, right?
So, several things here. One, she's just assuming that Batman has wealth. She happens to be right, but she could also be wrong. This lays the groundwork for actually a very fascinating examination of Linda and her relationship with her wealth and the kind of guilt that she clearly has towards it, and the fact that she's trying to reconcile this privilege that she has and pay it back or forward. However, because of that, she's also projecting a kind of anger and resentment outwards, and it's latched on to Batman. And the reason why I'm saying that that's what's going on is because you'll see that we don't see Batman reinforce any of those things that she just claimed about him. Linda's being used in the story in a way to articulate a certain viewpoint, and that is the idea that Batman being Batman because of his status is problematic. It's an argument you'll see pop up that he's just beating up on the mentally unwell, that he's just beating the poor. Sometimes people extend it to the idea that he's using his trauma and his hurt and his anger to hurt others, and that's been examined in eras like the Bronze Age. But at times it's boiled down to the idea that because he has wealth, he shouldn't be Batman. Now that is an argument that if one wants to make it, it can be done. However, it should be backed up by the narrative and the story itself. There should be something there to reinforce and play with. Otherwise, it's just a lecture. Now, it's also interesting reading this again in the context of there being absolute Batman, because then the way she's speaking becomes very interesting because she's linking his need for compassion, all those things, with his wealth. So then does that mean that if Batman didn't have wealth, would it be fine that he's not compassionate or understanding? Is it the brutality that's the problem or the wealth that's the problem? Because as we can see and have seen, it's not mutually exclusive. Now, as mentioned, all of this aside, the real issue comes from the fact that the story itself doesn't make this argument. It just kind of has her float this statement out there and assumes the reader will agree based on their subject positioning and a kind of view of Batman. Now, the idea of Linda not being into Batman, flipping the script on her Golden Age admiration, is actually quite interesting. And she has the background to do it. Of all of his love interests, she's a solid choice for that. However, here, and we're about to get into it, we haven't seen Batman be brutal or lack compassion or not try to understand people. In fact, we're going to see the opposite. There's also another layer added that makes it difficult to connect to if one views it as a Golden Age story and a Golden Age Batman. Because in that era, Batman was very often going up against organized crime and brutal criminals who take advantage of the very people she's talking about. And there would be stories where there would be lengthy investigations as he tried to figure out the whys of what was going on. But oftentimes in that era, he was seeking to help the very people she feels are being exploited. Now, again, exploring those kind of class divides and the way that they can play on each other without at times even realizing it, just kind of an unconscious interplay, can be very fascinating. There have been some great works about it, just high and low off the top of my head. Parasite's another one, but that's inspired by High and Low. The one time we see Batman in this story, he's going to have to enter an old folks home. Seemingly the home where Linda is working. Again, it's not explicitly stated, but you can connect the dots. So we see Batman in action at the Crown Elder home because a disgraced hypnotherapist, Tito Daka, great name, has hypnotized the inhabitants, forcing them to attack each other and beat each other to death unless their wills are changed to make him the beneficiary. So we're dealing with just complete unhinged villainy and someone taking advantage of people in a vulnerable position. In this scene, we see Batman go out of his way to not hurt them and to try and take them down without touching them, which doesn't match with Linda's grievance and it weakens her position. This sequence would have been a great time to show him going too far, to put the anger that's being discussed on display. They've played with that before. That was a significant portion of the autobiography issue that we touched upon. He talked about that anger and how it was something that he had to overcome and how at times maybe he had used it to go a bit further than he actually needed to. Now, when it comes to Linda and this, because she's so ideologically driven to hate Batman, because she's just so ideologically opposed to him, she's able to be hypnotized even deeper than the others. However, Bruce is able to shock her out of it by reaching her through with his human side.
My voice, Linda. Listen to my voice. Maybe I attack when I should listen. Maybe I can do better. But what I am, what this man is a work in progress.
See, that links it very nicely back to what she said to him at the beginning of the story. It's just that there's been nothing to indicate that he goes too far or maybe doesn't listen in this, because he spent the entire time listening, actually. She just comes across as kind of naive, which I don't think is the intent. I think she's supposed to be righteously correct. In order for her to be correct, you have to take a very myopic view of Batman's history and just kind of select very select moments, rather than taking a holistic one, which looks at how the character has moved and changed over time and the different perceptions of crime and criminals and how that impacts the way Batman and Bruce interacts with them and how that's still happening and how that's still playing out and how even this story and the things it's trying to discuss are a result of those cultural shifts. Batman and none of these characters are stagnant. They are always subtly shifting, even if their cores and the stories oftentimes have to be reset. But they do shift to fit in with what's going on. That's part of why Absolute Batman is doing so well at the moment, because it's really aligning with certain cultural values. It's also the same reason that mainline Batman is doing so well, because it too is reaching out to something in people. That one more of a fun factor type side. What we have here for Linda makes her come across like an upper class person who's lashing out because of her own internalized guilt and her privilege and then projecting it onto Batman, which would be an interesting story if one took the time to explore it.
What are you waiting for, Paige? Shoot! My eye feeds your natural hate. You cannot resist it.
You can't be. You lied to me? I mean, based on what she said, this is one of those times where, yeah, he lied to you.
What I do with this, my anger. I wish I had your heart, Linda.
I think that's very fascinating for him to say that he wants her heart to be open to listen when she's just prejudged Batman and assumed his entire backstory without knowing anything about him.
If I'd known you sooner, maybe I wouldn't have. I didn't know there could be light like yours. You showed me that.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. She does not deserve the Andrea Beaumont treatment. Dial it back. I think I've heard enough. Now, Linda does not remember what happened, but she says she remembers enough, and she claims to remember seeing Batman in action, and that he was reckless, out of control, which, again, does not match what we saw in the story. She then extrapolates that into the idea that he's like that every night, just out there, ruthless. The fact that he may have punched one or two, they go out of their way to say that there were no injuries. And also, if a crowd of possessed people is on you, some punches may need to be thrown. This story missed an opportunity for him to go too far, and it's kind of frustrating because the ideas that it's surface level skirting around are interesting, and the potential to try and present him in this opposite way in a seemingly golden age story, it's a golden, pun intended, opportunity, and it doesn't land, and it's so close.
If I find out Batman hurt a single one of them, he'll be the next one I see in court. Seeing in person what Batman does, the reckless tactics he uses on a nightly basis, his ends don't justify the means. And Batman better hope I never see him again. His ends don't justify the means. No one was hurt. I got to punch out the bad guy, but the means.
There's also a way you could read this as to that she does remember and she's telling Bruce to go away, but that doesn't fully align with the end of the story. Now, Bruce, of course, because of this, sees that they can't be together. And so we're back to the letter. And the letter he's writing is partially about his anger and how he's not ready to give it up, that he needs it still. It's a good letter. There's a lot of emotion in this relationship. The only thing is that it's confined in this very isolated space without context. If one applies context to it in any way, even if it's just knowing who Linda was in the past, it starts to kind of crumble a little. Now, we do get the tragic that she does write him back, but that he doesn't read it, he just burns it, because this was the Valentine's romance issue, so we need the tragedy. As he's throwing it in the fire, he thinks that she deserves better than maybe. And I don't know, I think Bruce also deserves better. Also, even without that, this relationship was not going to work out long term anyway. She was still in I can fix him mode. So this story in and of itself, as a tiny isolated piece, is not terrible. It's not the strongest. It does have some internal consistency issues, but it does raise some interesting ideas. And that's where it's the most frustrating, because it takes the core of Linda and does bring it forward with the potential for a cool twist. A woman who isn't all over Batman and whom sees things from a different, more compassionate perspective. But it doesn't come together. It's not fully formed, which is a shame, because the angle that she's trying to put forward is one that can be explored, and it has been explored a little bit with some very strong results. There are some fascinating, nuanced stories to tell with what they're playing with. The other thing about this, though, is that it very much is centered around Bruce in a very specific way that turns Linda into a narrative device and prop rather than a character who happens to be one who he is bouncing things off of like a support. She doesn't fully come together as a support. She just instead becomes an ideal that he can't live up to. Again, you could do so much with the fact that here's someone who also has a complicated relationship with her status as he does, but that people don't tend to know because Bruce has gone through all of this trauma that money can't actually fix, but it does give him the means to do something about it. But it also means that it set him on the outside from the very class of people he's meant to belong with. And now he's met somebody who also is on the outside more by choice. So they have that kind of connection. So to throw in that kind of element where he thinks that he's found somebody he can identify with, but she's really opposed to his activities as Batman. And then if you add some credence to what she's saying, because this is early days and maybe he is still very angry, and maybe he hasn't exactly fully formed his methods as of yet, you do have some really compelling, interesting stories there and a really firm foundation for an interesting relationship between Bruce and a civilian character. However, it feels more like the story is designed to have her say those few moments and then the dramatic letter burn, and that's it. Also, again, because we're reading this in the time of Absolute Batman, you do have that question of, is it not just the brutality and that drive that's what pushes Bruce to do too much, to sometimes go too far? It's an interesting question. But again, you see how all of these end up warping back to Bruce because Linda is less fully formed here. Still, it was cool to see someone remember her, and I think as a character she had a lot of potential. And this story shows you what some of it could be, but then doesn't fully go there. However, Linda is a cool historic support. I think you could do some things with her if you wanted. Maybe it's the future and people have. For that is all the Linda Page that I could find time of recording. Now there may be more out there. If there is, let me know, as always. For all the Linda I've seen, my favorite era is definitely the early golden age, her first appearances where she's doing things alongside Batman and Bruce, where she's out there and being a nurse and getting involved in all the things. The feisty Linda who talks back to the mob. And she did all that without even knowing that Batman was really a thing or coming. So that's just who she was, and that's really cool. But all of these are just my thoughts, and I want to hear yours. Perhaps you think The Last Tale is a brilliant take on Batman. Perhaps you don't think that Linda's that interesting at all. Julie all the way, or forget everything. It's all Selina. We don't even need to think about these other women. Whatever you're thinking, please share it. And if you made it all the way to this endpoint, thanks so much for taking the time to spend it discussing comics with me. I really appreciate it. Please do all the YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Again, thanks so much. It is appreciated. I know time is a precious, precious commodity. There will, of course, be more videos coming soon. I hope to see you there. Bye-bye.